All right, welcome back. You know, a lot of times it happens over in Europe first and somehow finds its way to us a little bit later. Remember when they first printed trillions and told us that inflation was transitory? They did that there, and then they did that here. And now they're taxing trillions of dollars over there and telling us that those taxes are also going to be transitory. But how about this? France, Italy, and the UK are all making moves for higher taxes. I guess that's what you do when you don't have anything else to do, right? So I love this next stat because this is how I feel about it all, right? Thankfully, Norway has showed us how this will transpire, right? The idiots in power there raised the wealth taxes to bring an additional, now hang on to this, $146 million in yearly tax revenue, right? So they raised taxes to make $146 extra million per year. But instead, individuals worth a combined total of $54 billion left the country. They got angry. And that led to a loss of $594 million a year in wealth and tax revenue. So that whole move was a net decrease of $448 million in tax revenue. So how do you like them apples, right? That sounds a lot like New York and Florida, if you ask me. How about this? Spain just recorded 1,000 fewer high net worth taxpayers. It was the first negative millionaire migration for the country since they imposed the wealth tax. And in the UK, it's the same story. Millionaires and billionaires are escaping as fast as they can. Now, where are they going? Well, the UAE, that's the United Arab Emirates, Singapore, and some are even going to Australia. Those are some of the hot spots for landing. You treat capital badly, and it leaves. That's the unfortunate part about that, right? My next guest will have an opinion on this, I'm sure. Please welcome into the show Ms. Rebecca Walser, Walser Wealth Management down in Tampa, Florida. Rebecca, happy Monday to you. Thanks for coming on the show. I just think it's patently obvious, but for some reason, when it comes to legislators, they don't see it like I do. But this is what happens when you start to do unfair things to people, I think.
In the law, Scott, we call it the law of unintended consequences. So in other words, you pass legislation in a silo and you expect it to operate on, go back to the scientific equation, right? You had controlled variables and you had the non-controlled variables. And it's like politicians think when they pass laws, they're passing them on controlled variables that will react a certain way. Oh, if we pass this law, we'll get $154 million extra dollars in taxes. And because they're not controlled variables, because we're passing laws against people that have individual autonomy and wealth and means, they can vote with their feet, i.e. they can leave and they can go somewhere else, especially in the EU, 27 countries you can go without even your passport. That's what they decided to do by design. And so it kind of reminds me when I was at NYU Law studying, getting my advanced law degree in taxation, we had a series of people come over from Europe talking to us about the VAT tax and how great it was and how America needed a VAT tax. And I'm looking around the room like, is anyone else like noticing the elephant in the room here? And the elephant in the room is, of course, that Europe has, their own taxation at each country level, but then they had the VAT tax. Whereas we in America have state income taxes, state property taxes, state sales taxes, but then we also have a federal income tax. So I was kind of like, like the federal government is kind of like the EU union with its charging.
Right.
Like, in other words, they don't have any understanding of how you just cannot layer another tax onto another tax onto another tax, and people will vote. And what you're seeing is a mass exodus from these European countries to the UAE, to Australia, to Singapore, and then obviously America right now is also taking some of them. We have a positive number as the rest of Europe is really looking at a decline. But Scott, the fact is that this happens to states too, to your point. If New York does something that people don't like, guess what? With remote hybrid working now, people can move to Florida, can domicile in Florida, can register their cars in Florida, their property in Florida, and then they are done with the New York tax scheme. We have a system that literally respects the what we call reciprocity. Each state gets to have their own tax scheme, and every other state has to respect that. And so you cannot tax your way out of a problem because you are not working on controlled variables. They are uncontrolled variables, and they will react in unintended ways.
And a couple things that these places do to really get crazy about it, right? And this is something that was started in World War II under the German government when they saw a lot of people trying to flee Germany for some reason, right? And they were starting an exit tax, which is insane. You got and California is trying to institute it. So they're going to, if they don't want you to leave, so they're going to impute your earnings for the next 2 or 3 years and tax you before you leave. That is insane. Number one. Number two is, you know what? This hot landing spot of Australia that we both mentioned, that was cited in the research that I saw, they're they're going to go to a tax unrealized capital gains. I mean, this is absolutely getting out of control. We've got exit taxes, you've got unrealized capital gains taxes, and this is all they know. They don't know how to grow. You never hear that word growth. I mean, finally, we've got a president in office now that's talking about growth, and they're talking about maybe 3-4%. Some crazy people talk about 5% growth. And a lot of these projections that we're seeing coming out of the government only have us projected at growing at 1.8%, when I think the standard would be 2.5 to 2.8%. But still, nobody really worries about that side of the equation. They think, it's like being a CEO of a firm and you think that you're going to cut your way to profitability. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you always have to grow your way out of it. But, the bigger point that you're making, Scott, and it is scary, and we did have something similar in 1933 with FDR when he signed an executive order that required all Americans to turn their physical gold in. And we ended the first part of the gold standard, which said that Americans could no longer turn their dollars in for gold on a $35 per ounce exchange, although foreign countries were able to continue to do that until 1971 when Richard Nixon finally ended the full gold standard. But what I want to say is, asset registries. That is what we are seeing, and that is what is coming. And that, to your point, they want to know all of the assets that you have so that in the event you decide to leave their taxing jurisdiction on your exit, they have the ability to basically tax you X percentage. So when you start with, you start with inflation by overprinting the money supply. So that's step one. Step two is taxation. We gave you too much money. We printed too much money. We're going to raise taxes. People are going to adjust to that. And then step three is, as they adjust, you're going to see countries start implementing asset registries. And we have already seen, there was in the article that we're talking about, there was an example of in Spain saying, if you're going to take out more than 3,500 euros, you have to give us the tax office 24-hour or 48-hour notice, and you have to give us the reason that you're taking out this much money. Right. It's like, now it is Big Brother registering your assets, approving your reasons for using your own money. So this is really getting alarming and scary when they're starting to ask us to report our assets held everywhere in the world. And of course, America is the only country in the world that taxes you on your worldwide income, no matter where it's earned.
That hit me hard when I lived. Yeah.
Scott, this is the result of too much money being printed. And this is why blockchain currency, cryptocurrency, is the end of fiat currency, the money multiplier, fractional reserve banking. It is going to be a sea change. It's going to take time, but this is the end of that system. And these governments being able to just explode the debt and then try to figure out how to collect the taxation later. You can't print more money than you're growing and your natural GDP on an annual basis. But
it's intentional. To your point, it's intentional. They explode the debt because they want to inflate their way out of their own debt, right? So they keep printing. That's what Western countries do, like ours, that gets in the situation like we're in. And I have them down here. When you were saying it, it's inflation, taxation, registration. That's what they're going to do. And we got to make sure that we keep an eye on that and make sure it doesn't happen.
Registration leading to confiscation.
Registration, confiscation. All right, I'll put the fourth one down there too. Rebecca, always great to have you on. Happy Monday to you. Thanks for coming on. Rebecca Walser, Wealth Management down in Tampa, Florida. All right.